All right, my English teacher friends. So I have a follow-up video to Taylor Swift's Anti-Hero in which we did a literary analysis of it in the first video. And for my AP Lang and my argument friends, I have an argument essay where we're going to take a look at a pretty interesting and fascinating prompt. And here's the kicker. Even though we've changed expository mode, we're not doing literary analysis. We're not reading lyrics as if they are a poem. We're going to do an argument paper, just like a FRQ3 on the AP Lang exam. My templates stay static. So what we did in terms of cobbling together the introductory paragraph, guess what? My templates are uniform. They work across the expository mode. So yet again, we'll be talking about the declarative and the inverted thesis. And as always, for body paragraphs, we are going to crush those with the syllogistic method. So let's dive right in. I'm just going to keep things rather status quo, and I'll do a whole bunch of Bob Rossing of my examples for you, and hopefully demystify the writing process for this particular prompt for teachers and students. So here's the prompt that I put together. So it says, Taylor Swift smashed several long-standing records with her latest album, Midnights. It comes with some certifiable hits like Midnight Rains, Vigilante Shit, Lavender Haze, and more. However, the music video for one of the songs, Anti-Hero, is courting controversy with Swifties and critics alike, asserting that Swift has touted fatphobic sentiments. For reference, the controversial part of the video shows Taylor stepping onto the weighing scales and the word fat popping up. While many fans criticized the video as representing fatness as something to be fearful of, others said it was a reflection of society's perception and does not itself promote fat phobia. So here's the argument portion. Argue whether or not Taylor Swift saying, "Imagine if I was fat, that's a nightmare," is fat phobic, even if it was unintentional. Further, should the video be amended or removed? So that is the gist of this prompt. So what we did in my class was we watched the video. We analyzed the lyrics, of course, for the literary analysis. And then we had this kind of quasi-Socratic seminar, more or less like my Plato's Plato discussion, where we tossed around and grappled with this particular question in reference to the video. And that was about the extent of it. So we probably batted this around for, I don't know, a good 30, 35 minutes until we kind of exhausted it and everybody weighed in and had their opinions and whatnot. So I'll go through how to write it. But one of the things I always say, and for those of you that are familiar with my work, you know this. I always say this: you got to Bob Ross your instruction. So I wrote this essay several times before I gave it to my students because I needed to see how the templates would I don't know, kind of unfold and unfurl themselves for this particular prompt because it's a little different. It's not your standard fare college board prompt. And in the process of Bob Rossing my instruction, I kind of anticipated some of the snafus and pitfalls that they're going to encounter, and we're gonna be able to circumnavigate it. So instead of just merely assigning the piece, I'm Bob Rossing it. I'm at the canvas, I'm at the easel, and I'm going to be painting introductions and body paragraphs with my students so that it's demystified and it's very crystal clear as to what specifically they need to do to construct this essay from start to finish. So yeah, it's just a good practice to get into. Position yourself as the expert writer in the classroom and paint with your students. So the very first question we have to ask ourselves is this: how do I write the introductory paragraph? And as always, you can declare or invert. And here it is. When you declare, you begin with the thesis, right? So let's go back here to the prompt. So you're going to argue whether or not Taylor Swift saying, "Imagine if I was fat, that's a nightmare," is fat phobic, even if it was unintentional. Further, should the video be amended or removed? So you're going to be yes, no, or qualify, right? Those are kind of the rhetorical positions you can take. So defend, qualify, challenge, refute. rhetorically what you're reduced to in your corner. And so if you declare, what you're going to do is immediately start with the thesis. What should Swift do, right? What stance should she take? I like it when my students sprinkle in a little bit of tier 2 level vocabulary, and what I mean by that is your average run-of-the-mill SAT level word. It is an academic paper, so vocab should be up, but in the wheelhouse, right? And I always have to disabuse a few of my knuckleheads in my class that using $1 million words is not the equivalent of doing good writing. So they got to stay in their wheelhouse, don't sound contrived, don't sound pretentious, but own the words. So I do big vocab study with my Word Study Academy throughout the academic year. So you're going to see at the time of the recording of this video, we're in the 20s of October, and I've had my kids since the day after Labor Day. So they're already wielding some pretty nice vocabs just from doing intense vocab study. The other thing that we focus on is my Nuance Academy, where we really embrace Strunken White's notion that there's 12 different ways to construct a single sentence. You're going to see my students manipulate their syntax for effect and purpose, ultimately to achieve a nice voice, rhythm, and flow to go for that elusive sophistication point. So instead of over-relying on independent clauses or short, simple declarative sentences, you're going to see some nice, flowy, supple sentences with some complexity out of my students. And then the kicker is this. When you're using my template of the declarative or inverted, it's always 4 sentences long. Every introduction, no matter the expository mode, is going to be exactly 4 sentences long. So we can flip this triangle over on its head and end with the point, end with the thesis. So the student might start with context, background, maybe a hook, an analogy, and as you funnel it down towards the 4th sentence, boom, tackle the prompt. Answer the prompt as directly and succinctly as possible. Get those tier 2s in there, focus on those sentence constructs and flex it for voice, rhythm, and flow. Exactly 4 sentences. So let's take a look at 4 that my students did, and we'll break them down together, and I'll talk you through how they're manipulating the template in order to yield this type of writing. So the first one reads like this. The bottom line is this. Given her ginormous platform, Taylor Swift, under any circumstances, should not be fat shaming. So we kind of got to a thesis here already. In terms of her primary target audience and demographic, Swift is appealing to young teenage girls, a group already susceptible and vulnerable to body image distortions. Perpetuating long-standing stigmas and stereotypes simply isn't the role model behavior one has come to expect from this pop star. Clearly, a delicate line has been crossed and needs to be addressed immediately. Right? So in this one, you get your context, your background, you funnel it down, boom, hit the thesis at the end. So in the first sentence, you kind of got a sense of the direction the student's going. Take a look at the vocab. It's pretty nice. I like the word platform, primary target audience, demographic, susceptible, vulnerable, distortions, perpetuating, long-standing, right? So nothing over the top. The kid owns all these words, but it's elevated without it sounding, I don't know how else to say it other than like contrived, pretentious, false. Like the kid's trying too hard. This sounds like a very intelligent 16, 17-year-old student writing, Also take a look at the sentence structures. I love this sentence right here. In terms of her primary target audience and demographic, Swift is appealing to young teenage girls, a group already susceptible and vulnerable to body image distortions. So it's very good how the sentences flowed. There's no parallelism. There's no redundancy in the sentence construct, and none of that rhythm and flow that you get when students overuse or over-rely the independent clause. So let's see the next one. While it is clear that Taylor Swift is a role model to a wide swath of fans, It is not her responsibility to bubble wrap her content so as not to offend the snowflakes who seem to be overly sensitive to just about anything and everything that crosses their plate. Well, that sounds like a thesis statement. All right, so let's see where we go from here. We live in a world of judgment, and one's weight just so happens to be one criterion by which one is assessed. As a rock star, Swift must be body conscious. Her entire career depends upon it. She should be unapologetic in every way possible. So again, it doesn't matter. So thesis first or thesis last, it really does not matter. There's no preference. There's no, teachers often ask me and students ask me, is one more, aesthetically pleasing? Is one harder to pull off than the other? Is one, rewarded more than the other? And the answer is no. I'm a big fan of students that can wield an analogy in argument, persuasion, and synthesis. It's really hard to do. It's really, really hard to do. And sometimes the muse just is vacant that day, and nothing's coming. There's no poetry. And so a good academic introduction, such as the ones we've looked at so far, will suffice and do. So here's another one. Swift needs to remove her fatphobic content from her video immediately. Again, that's very declarative, right? Answer the essential question, yes, no, or qualify right out of the gate. Boom, declarative. Not only does it perpetuate dysmorphic notions of feminine beauty, but it is callous and shallow to those who fight with their body images. Given that young girls are her primary target audience, Swift needs to be much more mindful. Two things must happen. Either the content get amended or a massive boycott of this album and all things Taylor Swift must ensue. Again, it's doing the exact same things. It does not matter. Thesis first, thesis last. Context, background. Focus on the vocab here. I really like it. Perpetuate, dysmorphic, notions, feminine beauty, callous, shallow, primary target audience, right? Amended is all very good. And the sentence constructs, very nice. Take a look at this last one. The kid used a colon, right? We don't see that very often, even from our best AP students. So between the Word Study Academy and the Nuance Academy, I'm seeing this already. Already this early in the academic year. And you have to have a real concentrated effort on the skills of grammar, punctuation, syntax, voice, rhythm, and flow. And voila, before long you'll get writing that looks like this. And it's pretty good, and they're just following a template. So this one, it's a student who's very concrete, very, very, very concrete. I have a hard time getting the student to expand upon his ideas. But look how the template's manipulated here, even by one of my, he was earlier in the year really struggling, really emerging, but look what he's doing now. Cancel culture has gone completely out of control. So we have not answered the essential question yet. So we got to expect it down here in the last sentence. Unfortunately for Swift, butthurt liberals feel entitled to dictate the terms of her art. Under no circumstances whatsoever should Swift either amend or remove this alleged fatphobic content. To do so is not only wrong, but it is un-American. And this was kind of the cool thing about this paper, is that we had some heated debates in class, and you can quickly ascertain a kid's political affiliations and the conversations that are occurring around the dinner table at home with regards to this. And again, my job is just to entertain it and help guide the conversation. So I'm not an ideologue. I don't proselytize. I'm not one to indoctrinate, and I let the kids have their own opinions and views, even if I disagree with it. And this kid's very strong in his opinions. And nonetheless, the template houses the thesis. And, if the kid is writing for the purposes of an AP language exam for FRQ3, this is getting the thesis point all day long, and out of the gate, I think he set himself up to get the sophistication point as well. The sentence constructs aren't as supple as the previous three that we looked at, but it gets the job done. It cuts to the chase, and is well done nonetheless. So our next question is this: how do I write the body paragraphs? And for those that are familiar with my work, you know that I always tell my guys to proceed syllogistically. What is a syllogism? What is a syllogistic body paragraph? First, I'll give you a little bit of background on it. The syllogistic method is rooted in the Aristotelian tradition. Aristotle ran a school called the Lyceum, and the rich aristocratic boys would go there to learn about polemics, oration, debate, wordsmithing, word wrangling, the art of the word. And they would grapple with these big essential questions, kind of like what we're doing. But they might throw out something that you would see in classic texts like Plato's Republic. What is justice? And these great philosophical think tankers and scholars would step to the proverbial mic and they would drop their definition of what justice is. Here's what Aristotle observed. Those students who had really good, tight lines of reason, he called it cogency, like locked in logically. So those kids that would win the debates and have really good lines of reasoning argued syllogistically. And what he meant by that is that they just simply go premise, premise, conclusion. So if I were to say in premise 1, arsenic is deadly. Premise 2, my dog ate arsenic. Conclusion, my dog is going to die. You'd say, Christian, that makes perfect sense. It's unfortunate for your dog, but that makes perfect sense. When our students write, we want them to be this cogent. We want their lines to be that exacting, right? When they reason, either they're doing inductive or deductive reasoning. Be calculated. So for this particular paper, this is what it looks like. This is what the template always looks like for argument, persuasion, synthesis. The first premise is going to argue a why reason. Up top in the thesis, we did not state why. We just say yes, no, or qualify. That's it. We drop a thesis, and we don't get into the reasons why. So the reasons why come in the first premise, and that first premise is always going to be 3 sentences long. There's a reason for that. On FRQ1 on the AP Lang exam, the College Board states 3 times, your argument must be central. And I wish that the College Board would have that rule for all 6 FRQs. I'm talking Lang and Lit combined. Because we have to remember, it's all expository writing, whether it's rhetorical analysis, literary analysis, argument, persuasion, synthesis, research. It's all expository writing, and all expository writing is an act of argumentation. So it's really important that the argument stays central. I don't want kids getting into their textual support in like the first or second sentence of the body paragraph. Otherwise, they're ceasing to argue, right? They're summarizing. They get plot heavy, or they just get overly ambitious with summative statements, and that's not the demand of the assignment. So I like to take 3 sentences to set up that why reason. Textual support. Here's what I ask my students to do. Draw in something from the outside to help them support it. Make a connection outside of the video, outside of the argument to help them support it. I know some teachers might be like, yes, but I want to do like this great semiotic deconstruction of the video. Then do that. I'm trying to model this really closely after FRQ3 on the AP Lang exam. So you're going to see my students do, the textual support trick that they always do for FRQ3, and I'll model that twice for you in this. And then the conclusion of the syllogistic body paragraph. So the conclusion of the body paragraph, not the conclusion paragraph of the essay, is where the textual analysis is housed. And this is where we get the links, the echoes, the promises. Everything's got to go back to the thesis, and everything's got to go back to the prompt. And in terms of movement, this takes 10 to 12 sentences. Every syllogistic body paragraph is 10 to 12 sentences. So let's take a look here. The first 3 sentences. So this is a student who struggles a little bit, and they struggle with why reasons. So in my template, I have my students say, again, the ones that are struggling, they look at their blank screen or their blank sheet of paper and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing, even after I've Bob Rossed it a whole bunch. I'm like, all right, here's what you're going to do. Say the reasons why right out of the gate. Because if you say the reasons why, then guess what? You're going to state the reason why. You're going to argue a why reason. It's very artificial, very contrived, very training wheels, but it works. So look at how this goes. The 3 sentences. The reasons why Swift should remove the offensive content from her musical video are abundantly clear. First, the influence her statements have on her intended age demographic have far-reaching ramifications. As such, instilling values of hate and shame are not things Swift should be broadcasting from her platform. All right, so one of the things I do during writing workshops is I pause after the 3rd sentence, and I ask my student, what are you promising me? Because what are you promising your reader? Because the first premise is a promise. So we have to break this why reason down into a promise. There are certain things that I'm expecting to see. Talk about the intended age demographic, right? And that how Taylor Swift is an influence, right? She's a role model, and she can't be broadcasting hate-filled speech, given her celebrity. It's not good, right? She has too much influence, and you don't want to be a bad influence, right? You don't want to use your platform to do bad. So the second premise needs to have textual support that is germane to that promise. So look where we go here. In the literature of countless prominent female authors, we get the opposite side of the spectrum and its concomitant results. Take as an example Jane Yolen's poem, Fat is Not a Fairy Tale. So we studied this in class a couple weeks ago. So this student is bringing something that we did in class into it. So look how they use outside sources to support and defend the thesis. In it, she asks her audience to consider the false body image narrative that is purported in the likes of classic Disney narratives. Through a series of puns, she implores the reader to actualize a world where there is a Rapunzel and snow elephant and sleeping Tubby instead of the typical waifs that are depicted. This is the type of message Swift needs to be communicating, not images of hate. Yolen is right. Starting in early infancy, girls, Swift's target demographic, are inundated with images that suggest the notion that one cannot be beautiful unless they are slim. And it goes on to the next slide here. Another example is Jessica Sanders' children's book entitled Love Your Body. In it, the author celebrates all the shapes and sizes while also emphasizing that our bodies are amazing no matter what. Books containing such a message are quite the opposite of Swift's fat-shaming proclamation. So let's go back before we go to the conclusion. So do you see how the focus is literature here? So this student brought in outside sources, literature, Jane Yolen's poem, and Jessica Sanders' children's book. So it all ties to the line of reasoning, right? Use your platform responsibly. Get rid of the hate speech. But in the end, we got to bring it back to Swift. We got to bring it back to the prompt. We got to bring it back to the thesis. So look how we conclude this syllogism. Hate needs to be censored in our country and should not be left unchecked or unquestioned. Swift's rancor and disdain for other must be addressed in either the immediate removal of the video or it must undergo a radical revision. So the conclusion usually just takes 2 sentences. All in all, you're shooting for 10 to 12 sentences. So that's the kicker, right? The textual support comes from the kid's recall, right? I don't want them quoting. I don't want them paraphrasing. I don't want them using anything but their noodles for this, because that's all you can do on FRQ3 in a true argument situation. So that's how we do it. So the next question is this: what do I do next? Because my students on all 6 FRQs write 4 paragraphs, intro, 2 bodies, conclusion. So that's true for Lang and Lit, 4 paragraphs. So what do I do next? And the answer is bust out another syllogism. Just stick everything to the template. So this is a student taking the opposite point of view, but you're going to see 3 sentences first premise. Second premise begins the 4th sentence. Gives specified detail in that second premise. And in the end, link it all back to the prompt, the thesis, and Swift. So let's take it from the top. Let's see how it goes a second time. This student did not use the training wheel of the reasons why. They felt like they were skillful enough to kick that scaffold off the building. The issue is clear. Left-wing propagandist campaigns intended to censor innocuous art needs to stop immediately. Clearly, Swift has done nothing wrong. Under the optic lens of leftist politics, being health conscious is now under assault. So what have we promised here? Well, I'm expecting a big conversation about the left censoring, basically cancel culture, and that the real issue here is that Taylor Swift is just basically giving a message of, hey, I'm healthy. I want to be healthy. And that's actually a good message to give to little girls. It's not a message of, hey, I hate your body, or I'm speaking, with, a certain degree of contempt about your body image. So let's see where this goes. So second premise begins fourth sentence. And we have to get specific. We have to give some concrete examples from our head. In many regards, the apparent wrath Swift is at present receiving is analogous to the onslaught of boos Kelly Clarkson received when she announced her latest diet plan. Clarkson, a self-admitted pop star with weight management issues, publicly claimed in recent weeks that she desires to lose 75 pounds. Again, note the specificity. You got to get detailed in this. Just in terms of the pragmatics of health, this makes a lot of sense. Her weight is unhealthy, and at her age is already complicating matters. From my perspective, her fans should be on the sidelines cheering her on in her quest to lead a healthier lifestyle. But no, the liberals are canceling her for giving little girls a false narrative of fat shaming, right? So again, keep it all germane to the promise. So we're talking about the liberals. We're talking about weight. We're talking about another celebrity that's being juxtaposed to Taylor Swift. It goes on. In fact, on the heels of announcing her next ventures, fans have already lined up to ban her promotional endeavors. This is plain silly. An overweight woman, a woman in a major spotlight, by the way, should be celebrated for taking charge of her life in a responsible manner. Little girls need to know from an early age that weight has a consequence and that diet and exercise are a must. So all the textual support that was brought in here is definitely germane, relevant, pertinent. Use your adjective to connect so the line of reasoning stays intact. In the conclusion, bring it back to Swift, bring it back to the prompt, bring it back to the thesis, probably take one or two sentences. Swift is in the same boat in many ways. So we got the connector. She has nothing to apologize for in suggesting to young girls that they need to be mindful of their health and diet. Perfect. Brought it all back to the thesis. And again, that all takes about 10 to 12 sentences every single time. And kids can do that every single time they write, whether it be for argument, persuasion, synthesis, rhetorical analysis, literary analysis, research. It does not matter. The syllogistic method can be used. It's the golden template. So if you got questions or want to try your hand at this, and are interested in using these slides to host your own writing workshop, feel free to email me at teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. And for those of you that are interested in my professional development offerings and opportunities, note that going forward, I'm teamed up with the National Writing Project. So all of my professional development offers are going to be hosted by the National Writing Project, and that's good news for people that need professional development hours, because everything that I do with NWP is NWP will give a completion badge of a set number of hours. And to give you an example, my Teach It Right 5-week mastermind, it's 5 weeks, 1 hour a class for a total of 5 hours. And NWP gives 10-hour completion badge. So they sweeten the deal quite a bit with these things. So going forward, once a month, we'll be doing a webinar. So coming up soon, I have my alternative grading methods, We're going to be doing one where we look at how to teach line of reasoning using children's literature. We have my AP Strategies for Success, my Nuance Academy, my Word Study Academy. So stay abreast of my comings and goings and the irons in the fire, and I'll be sending emails and notifying the Facebook groups as well. So hope you found this to be useful, and for now, happy teaching, happy writing.